Yeah, well, here's what I'm gonna do to start this show. We're gonna we're gonna shed a little light on the subject here, literally and kind of figuratively. Yeah, there we go. Hi, welcome to episode 18. This is called the last minute planning on the fly. I guess we'll call it. Yeah, welcome to my bedroom. A little different setup today because things are the way they are in the house right now. So I want to be cool instead of hot. So yeah, I'm in my bedroom. But anyways, hi. 84 feet with Cady and Cap is on the air. Woo! It's been a heck of a day already. I'm Brian Cady. No Brian Capitula. Brian is he's under the weather, we'll say. So yeah, he's under the weather. Things are all good. Just a lot of traveling. A little, I don't know if it's jet lag or whatever it may be, but hey, it's fine. It's fine. We're not gonna make fun of him until I see him face to face. We'll just call it that. But yeah, seriously, Cap. Again, well, yeah, Twitter, we're there at 84 feet podcast. See, look on the screen. Email 84 feet podcast at gmail.com. Also on Facebook, search for 84 feet with Cady and Cap. That all being said, uh, I guess I've been wanting to get on for a while now. Finally got things to work out between my hectic schedule with baseball and Cap's crazy wrap the AAU schedule, but unfortunately, obviously, he's sick. But I know he's very interested in hearing about a few things from our guest today. Uh, one of my absolute closest friends, known each other for over 20 years, and he's now the brand new girls varsity head coach for Hoosick Falls Panthers basketball. Mike Long Jr. Mikey, what up?
Hey Ryan, how's it going?
It's going well. Let's focus in on that latest news. Um, yeah, took me a little bit by surprise. Probably took a lot of people by surprise. Just walk us through it, man. Your JV boys 1 minute, and there was no rumblings, there was no big build up to it, and then all of a sudden, whoop, you're the new girls varsity coach. So just kind of walk through that process a little bit about what that was like, and just how much of a surprise it ended up being for you.
So as you know, I got my start in girls basketball over a decade ago now, and went back over to the boys side, and have been pretty much. 1 year was back on the women's side for college, but have been pretty much on the boys side ever since that for those first couple of years, and then towards the end of last summer, so I was at LaSalle the 2 years prior. I lived in Colorado when I moved back. Took that JV job at LaSalle. About a week before the school year last year, I got offered a counselor job at Hoosick Falls, which is what my full-time job is. And I didn't really know Mike Lilac at the time. I knew who he was, obviously. I know Alex really well. But I got offered the job, and I was also offered the girls' job and a counselor job out of Mount Anthony in Bennington. So, but I emailed Mike Lilac, and he called me, and he actually said he needed a JV coach. His JV coach from the previous year had left, and he was looking for somebody. So, I live in Troy. Hoosick Falls is a lot closer to Troy than Bennington is. It's about a 30-minute ride for me. Bennington would have been 50 minutes. So, it's a lot closer. So I did that for a year. And I had the full intent of being the JV boys coach again for this season until the application period had closed. The deadline, the day it was due, just, had conversations with a few people and everything. And, Mike Lilac is a legend, and I absolutely loved working for him. And, the way he runs his program and everything is top notch, but, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. And while I'm not super old, I'm 36 years old, and I kind of wanted to jump back into running my own program again, especially now that I'm at a place that I want to work at for a long time. So I know that I have an opportunity to be at Hoosick Falls and build a program and run a program, and make the girls' side just like Mike Lilac has done on the boys' side. And so those all those factors kind of swayed me to go over to the girls' side and do that.
So let's just all right. So it was so basically it was just totally by happenstance is essentially the
Yep.
way it worked out. Sounds like.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's let's work our way from the past to the present day. Let's start with obviously how we met. We met at CBA. I was a sophomore. You were an incoming freshman. Um, and we end up meeting as we've kind of reflected a little bit before we got this going. We met on the as I was already on the speech and debate team, which by the way, I had only joined. Let me think. I joined it very late my freshman year. You were doing it right. You were hopping in at the beginning of the schedule in the fall. I was the guy that was still feeling things out like my first 6 months of freshman year. I was like, all right, this sounds all right. Let me try this out. But it wasn't really speech and debate we necessarily bonded over. It was something else we bonded over. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so like you said, as before we were getting things set up. I mean, listening to the Queen song on the bus was what we bonded over. But then I think we both realized we had a passion for sports and a passion for athletics, and that really took our friendship to the next level. I'm 100% certain we would have been friends regardless, but I think that the sports is what has kind of also kept our relationship as strong as it has been for the number of years that we've been friends for.
Yeah, because it's so weird how it's like it's found a way to have us keep intersecting in and out. No matter where you are, where I am, it's always I have an announcing gig here or you're coaching a game there. It's just that's just how life has been working out in our case, and even being together for a year, which we'll get into in a little bit. Um, so obviously we were at CBA while Coach Dave Domel was coaching varsity hoops there. Um, just announced his retirement a few months ago. Now going to be succeeded by one of his former players in Jalal Cancer. But let's just focus in on Coach Domel for a moment there, because obviously he was, uh, you know, there for a very long time, taking care of the boys varsity program, constantly in the in the running for being a competitor in Class AA and sectionals, going back to when it was still the Big Ten Conference around, and then eventually when it got merged into the Suburban Council. Just talk a bit about Coach Domel and his legacy and the impact he had on you while you were at CBA.
I it's hard to kind of figure out how I want to word this about Coach Domel, because I think he's such a big part of Section 2 basketball over the last 2.5 decades. And what he does at CBA as a counselor. I know he's been a teacher and whatever, but he was a counselor when we were there. So I first got to know him as a counselor, not as the basketball coach. I knew he was. Me and my dad, when I was in 8th grade, I remember Victor Muth and Sean McCluskey were playing for Domel, and we used to always go to those games. My dad actually was he recruited Sean's older brother, who played at Albany High, who ended up not going to CBA, but that was at the time when or not going to Sage rather. But we would go after I figured out I was going to CBA. We would go to the basketball games all the time. I would say, "Who's the coach?" And my dad would say, "Dave Domel." And so, but I remember, having conversations when I was a freshman on the bus traveling to games with him. And my father was coaching college at the time at Sage. So, um, I really wasn't around varsity a lot then, because usually when varsity was picking up, I was going to, their games or their practices or whatever. But then my sophomore year, my dad came in. Domel said, Mike, your dad or your son's here. Why don't you come be an assistant? So my dad was an assistant for him for 3 years. I think, first of all, before we started at CBA, I mean, they had like 4 or 5 really bad years. And I think Dave Domel kind of at that point was a model for how to build a program, because he lost a lot of players because he wanted to keep everybody together, every level together. And if you watched, when they went through that 10-year run where they made the section final every year, they were good on every single level. Because that's how we built it. When you're a varsity coach at a young age, like I was when I was in Colorado, there's a tendency to want to be really good right away, without thinking about, okay, I got to think about 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 3 years from now. And Dave Domel he had the foresight to be able to, kind of wait it out and say, I'm going to wait till the guys like Brian Monahan, Joe Bova, Greg Holland, the guys who buy into my philosophy of how to build a program, I'm going to wait for them to get, up there. So we, and then, like I said, we saw what he did with the 10 section finals in a row, 7 championships, a state championship. And then even since then, in the 15 years since then, 10 years since then, rather, they were still one of the best programs in Section 2 year after year. And that's what when I think of Dave Domel as a coach, and when I think of him, his legacy, that's what I think of is his ability to maintain success and be a model of consistency, for Section 2. And as a person, I mean, Coach Domel as a person, he was a great mentor, and he was he always had really good advice. He always listened. He was always somebody there who you knew you could count on. And I think that goes a long way too with, kind of pointing to how good of a coach he is. Cause I think that's the other part of coaching is you need to be able to be that person, that kids can talk to. And that's who Dave Domel is.
And don't you dare talk bad about Notre Dame to him. That was the other thing. Don't you dare challenge him when it comes to the Fighting Irish, especially on the football field or on the hardwood.
So I remember real quick. I do remember when you speak about Notre Dame. He used to he had a gold shamrock, and he used to go down the bench, and have every player rub it. And I remember as a freshman, I would do stats on their bench. I was a quasi manager for varsity because, like I said, I was leaving a lot after JV to go see my dad's team, be with my dad's team. And the first time my Domel came down, I had never experienced a superstition like that before. But yeah, and then we had the Notre Dame fight song, if you remember, as our coming out song for basketball. So I don't say anything bad about Notre Dame to him.
Now, before we get talking about your college travels, I just find something interesting in the dichotomy here, because you talked about Coach Domel being a coach as well as the freshman sophomore students guidance counselor, and that falls into where you are because you're a full-time counselor as well as somebody who enjoys coaching on the hardwood during the winters. Talk a little bit more about that, that juxtaposition between being a counselor and dealing with, academic and personal problems with students, and then how that can translate as well into being a quality head coach that's not just trying to teach basketball, but also trying to instill life lessons in the players that you are able to have under your wing as a coach.
So just relating that real quick to Dave Domel. When I didn't really know what I wanted to get into, and I knew coaching was, at the time I had been coaching for a few years before I went to grad school, and thinking about things that I could do that would allow me to coach. Dave Domel was actually one of the first people I thought of, and I thought of him being a counselor, and I'm like, that's a job that seems like it fits really well. I have a different relationship with the students as a counselor than teachers do, than administrators do, which I think is really cool. I don't have to be the disciplined guy. I don't have to be the bad guy. I can really be somebody that they can just talk to. And I think that helps as a coach, because I'm not just that disciplined guy. I'm not just that, oh, if I tell coach this, he's going to fly off the handle. That's not my job at the school. So I feel it makes my job easier as a coach, and it lends itself to being a coach better, because you can do that. And students aren't as afraid to talk to you, and players aren't as afraid to, tell you what's going on. When you're a teacher, I think they're always thinking kind of, if I tell coach this, what is it going to mean? Are they going to be mad? Or are they going to whatever? But as a counselor, really the kids don't worry about that. But I think it's great because I'm still in the school every day. They still see me, because I've also been in that position where I haven't been working in the school I coach at, and that has its own challenges too. Yeah, I think being a counselor and a coach really go hand in hand, for the reasons that I said.
And then, so going back to your academia a little bit, you end up going to three schools that have connections to. I'll just call it. I'd say two of the mentors you've had over the course of your career. I should just say your whole life, because obviously your dad's one of them. So you can't just pick up your dad at age like 12 and call him your dad. He's there your whole life. But anyways, so you end up going to U Albany at one point, which Brian Fruccio was a coach of an assistant coach at one point. And then you also went to St. Rose, which your father started that program from scratch, that basketball program. And then you did your grad school at Sage, where when it was still a junior college, your father was a coach for that men's program for a while. Uh, how did that? What did you learn during that time? That helped you develop this concept of wanting to be a counselor and wanting to be a coach? And I mean, was it all just a fact of having been around basketball all your life like that, or was there something extenuating, a secondary reasoning that kind of fell into place?
So that honest truth, I as you know, my passion, my first passion in life was theater. I went to school for theater. I went to St. Rose because, like you said, my dad started the program. It was just easy. It was a school that I always had a connection with. And at the time, Sage hadn't brought their basketball program back yet. So St. Rose was the school. And, Bury did the same thing with my dad that Domel did. He called my dad up and, said, hey, Mike is going to St. Rose now. Come back and be my assistant. So my dad was back there. So it made it easy. I was the manager the 2 out of the 3 years that I was there. When I transferred to SUNY Albany, I was actually working professionally in theater at the time. But I'm not going to get into it. It's a long story. There was some kind of issue with credits and stuff that caused me to have to leave that job. I was walking the aisles of Target in East Greenbush at the time. And Mike Sheridan, who was the JV boys coach at LaSalle, when I first got started, I've known him for, I mean, probably the only friend I've known longer than you, and so he, we got talking, and I was like, hey, do you need help? Like, I've never been somebody who can do one thing. I need to have every burner going in my life. So I said, hey, do you need some help? And he did. And so I volunteered with him for a year, and still not thinking that was going to be something that I really wanted to do. And then through that year at LaSalle, start realizing I didn't even realize how much of an impression that, I didn't really know Brian Fruscio that well at the time, but I didn't realize the effect that Brian Bury and my father especially had on me until that year. Because over the course of that year, realizing that I had a knack for it, realizing that, I had a passion for it, and it was something that was really fun. And, there's some feelings you get when you're involved in sports that you really don't get anywhere else. So, that's kind of what brought me into coaching. Like I said, with being a counselor, never something that I was considering until I, figured out, I want to coach. And then, like I said, I thought about Dave Domel right away, being a counselor and a coach. And I applied to grad school for teaching. And because my dad worked at St. Rose, the director of grad admissions called me up, and she said, hey, I'm looking through your application. I'm seeing your references. You've coached, you've been a TA, you've worked in special ed. You should really probably think about school counseling. I looked into it, and I liked it. And, as they say, the rest is history. And here we are, 12 years later now, doing both. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love both of them. So.
And I gotta say, knowing you and your personality, I think in the end, you ended up in the best situation possible as far as school counselor. Because I never like you, obviously originally, like that wasn't like the first thing that would have popped into my head for you.
Mm-hmm.
But now that when you look back and you kind of put everything together as far as you're just the way you carry yourself, and obviously your connection to the youth and wanting to help them, it all just like it makes sense in the grand scheme of things when you put everything together. It's like, oh yeah, that, like, as a school counselor, that totally makes sense. Like, why wouldn't it? Now, as far as your coaching is concerned, I'm basically gonna divide this into like 4 parts essentially. So part 1 being, you end up doing Tamarack Modified Girls, which I believe Eric Medved was still there at the time when you got started. Am I correct in that?
Eric was I was the modified, because in the Western League they have the 7th and 8th grade,
Right.
Are separate teams, and he was coaching the 8th grade because his daughter Cassidy was on modified, and he had stepped down from the boys to spend more time with her, and figured that he's a basketball guy. He was going stir crazy not being able to coach. So he figured, well, I'll coach her for the 2 years she's in middle school. So, I met Eric. We were actually in the first spring league he had for AAU. Back then, there were only like 5 or 6 AAU teams around here, not like now where there's hundreds. So he got us all in a league. Really, it wasn't like what it developed into when you and I coached together. It was, the league was basically a package of tournaments. So, I had gotten to know him through that. I was in 5th grade. He was probably about 25. I think he's 15 years older than I am or something like that. Something in my head, going back to LaSalle, something in my head just told me to reach out to him when I figured out this was something I wanted to do and I wanted to get paid for it. And, and he brought me in there and I was there for a year. And then he took over the varsity program and then I moved on. But Eric was, speaking of mentors, I don't want to answer too many questions that weren't asked yet, but speaking of Eric, Eric is one of my best friends and one of my biggest mentors. The first mentor I really had outside of my father.
So you go through your time at Tamarack, and then you end up at Coxsackie Athens doing JV coaching there. And it's funny because, incidentally, just the way things worked out, you taking on that job led to my first full season of announcing basketball.
Yep.
So I'm going to tell this story, and you can correct me at any point if I'm wrong on any of the details. So I remember we met up at one point. I had just taken on a new job in my radio career at that point at Albany Broadcasting. And we met up at Hudson Valley one day because you had taken on that job, but also already taken on the opportunity to announce the Sage basketball games for them. So you met with me just to kind of figure out if there was a way we could split the schedule, which I was more than happy to. And so I ended up having the first weekend of game. And you can tell me if I'm wrong on this. I had the first weekend of games that they had at home that season. And after that first set of games, I don't know if you texted me or called me. This was like a decade ago. So I don't know. It was probably a text knowing us. I'm just guessing. But basically, you figured, you know what? I got a lot on my plate. I really want to focus on making this work. Can you take on the whole season instead of just the part of the season? Does that sound right? Am I getting the details balanced out right?
Yeah, that is how it happened. At the time, Brian Barnes, the men's coach at Sage, had asked me if I wanted to announce, and I said okay. And they had I think they were in like their third or fourth year back, and they were looking to, bring the program up, class it up a little bit. And he said, we're looking for an announcer. So Ann King, Ann King, she ended up calling me, and I had already accepted the job at Coxsackie, but because Brian and Ann both had expressed that they really wanted me to do this, I was going to try to make it work. And then, like you said, we met at Hudson Valley. I said, hey, I got this buddy who works in radio. There are some games I'm not going to be able to make. Would you be okay with him filling in? And they said, yeah. So, and then, like you said, we had the Hudson Valley thing. And then when, after that first weekend, like you said, I was like, yeah, I really want to focus all my energy on coaching right now. So I'm glad it worked out for both of us. And, it worked out certainly for Sage. I know how big of a part of your life that was at the time. So I think it worked out all around.
Yeah, I ended up being there for 6 seasons, and it was just like I still talk to Coach Barnes every so often, and even to the point where and we don't have to go into the big story behind this, but someone was trying to start a rumor with me that he was going to be stepping down this summer. It was absurd. I got it cleared up with him, but he's like, I don't know who told you that, but no. I'm like, I didn't think so. But anyways, and then unfortunately, we lost Anne. She passed away from cancer about a year ago now. So, obviously keeping her family, Tracy, I believe, is still helping run the Liberty League. So obviously our thoughts and prayers with them. But then as you get through that, this is the phase 2 I want to get to, within your coaching career because you end up having two stints coaching out in Colorado. You had a JV boys job at Brush High School and a varsity job at Centennial. Um, and we'll have to get into the nitty details about each individual job, but just in general, what attracted you the first time to go out to Colorado and try things, and then, obviously you had enough of a reputation where you came back home from the first stint, and then Centennial came calling, and you wanted to see if you could make a go of it there. What was it about Colorado that was so intriguing to you to go out there and give it a go coaching out there?
So what first brought me out there was I had just gotten out of grad school, and I was actually offered, and I was looking forward to Kat being on here too, because I was originally offered the varsity job at Albany Academy for Girls. That's how my whole academy thing came into play when I moved back the first time. So I was offered that job, but they didn't have a teaching job, and I said, "Well, I need a full-time job at this point." And I remembered my advisor used to always tell us that if you're looking to get a counselor job in New York State, it's going to be competitive. But if you're okay with moving out of state, you're probably going to find a job pretty quick, because a lot of states need, especially then in Colorado, I feel was one of the first states that really put a lot of energy into mental health for students. So, I was just online, and I just saw Colorado, and of course I thought mountains and everything. So I applied. I'd never been to Colorado. Got the job, got out there, realized it was in rural Colorado, 3.5 hours from the mountains. But yeah, I was actually, the first year I was out there, I was actually at Ray High School. And I coached their middle school teams, boys and girls, because out there, they're two different seasons. But then, I went to coach a Brush, like you said, Brush JV boys. I really liked it out there, but at the time well, there were some family things that happened the first time when I moved back that were going on, that I need to be back here for. My grandfather was not doing well, so that kind of brought me back here the first time. And then I did the couple years at Academy on the boys' side, and then I did, like you said, I moved back out there, wanted to give it another go, and then COVID happened, and it got really hard. Both my parents are older, so it got kind of tricky traveling back and forth. So that, that's what brought me back here 3 years ago again. But life happens. But I really enjoyed Colorado. I really enjoyed the brand of basketball out there and everything. It was a good time, and I think, like I said, I've learned a lot of things from my first varsity opportunity out there that I want to do differently or do better this time.
So I have a memory to bring up, and then a question coming off of this time in Colorado. The memory, now that you mention it, I vividly remember you showing me your proposal of sorts that you had put together for your interview for that academy job. I remember you had it printed out. It was like a presentation thing. Yeah, now that you mention it, I do, because I remember you having the academy logo on the cover sheet.
Right.
So yeah, it's funny you brought that up, because I just totally forgot about that. But the question I have, as a baseball fan like you, I am jealous that you got to go and see games at Coors Field at any point when you were there before, or when you visited after the fact. A little jealous you've gotten to go to Coors Field.
It's beautiful. I love Coors Field.
So jealous, so jealous. But now here's the true test for you: Coors Field or City Field?
So as a Met fan, I mean, City Field has some, but objectively, if I was going to look at them objectively, Coors Field is a lot nicer of a ballpark.
Okay, all right. Hey, I'm just glad you have objectivity there. That's good. Uh, Now we get to phase three, as I'll call it now. You mentioned Albany Academy, and you get in that program, and at the time, Hamir Wright, who would eventually go on to play Division I ball at the University of Washington. He was coming through the closing out of his high school career, and that was the start of the emergence of some guy from Amsterdam. I'm trying to. Oh, Andre Jackson. That's right. Who, as we all know, went on and won national championship at UConn and is now just finished his rookie year with the Milwaukee Bucks. Playing next to Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton. No big deal. Whatever. But let's focus in on those 2 years. One of which I helped you out as much as I could with you were the freshman boys head coach, and then you're also a varsity assistant under Coach Fruch. Those 2 years, man, I think they were, how should I put this? Up to that point in time, and you can tell me if I'm totally wrong, I felt like at that point in time, as far as your time within Section 2 is concerned, I think that was probably, from the outside looking in, the most fulfilling 2 years you had so far at that point. What were your thoughts on that?
Up until then, yeah, definitely. I mean, so I moved back, and like I said, and this is where kind of, I also wanted to mention about the Albany Academy for Girls job, because that's what ended up landing me where I was at the boys job. So Michelle Kellen was girls athletic director. She had just taken over when I moved out to Colorado when she offered me the job. She ran into Karen Haig, who was the women's coach at St. Rose, who I always got along super well with. Super nice lady, if you know Karen. But Michelle was looking for a coach, and she's like, she ran into Karen and said, I haven't found the right person yet. And Karen knew what my ambition was, knew I was young, wanted to really establish something. So she recommended me. So when I moved back from Colorado, I forget if I reached out to Michelle, if she reached out to me, if Karen told her how it worked, that she knew I was back in the area. And I remember I was working a basketball camp at St. Rose, and I got a text from Michelle Kellen saying, hey, I just talked to our head of school. We have a psychology teaching job. Would you want it? Now it was only part-time, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'll come in and at least talk about it. So I met with the head of school, Scott Milliken, and then I met with Paul Gallucci because Scott found out that I coached basketball as well. So he sent me down to see Paul Gallucci, and Gallucci said, when he found out that, my family had history with the Fruchios and everything, he says, yeah, I think Brian needs a freshman coach too, and maybe a varsity assistant. So, they gave me both of those jobs. He called Fruch, and Fruch said, tell him he's got both jobs. And then I took the teaching job. So that's kind of how that happened. But I mean, Brian Fruchio taught me a lot about basketball, and he taught me a lot about life too. He's, as you know, he's one of I think he's very misunderstood, if that makes sense. I think, a lot of people who see him from the outside who don't know him have one impression of him. And then once you meet him, he's the most down to earth, nicest, most genuine person, you'll ever meet. What we'll tell you about Coach Fruchio, is so he would routinely, especially my first year, he would like sit on the end of my bench. But he, not in a way where he would tell me what to do or anything, but he would always come up to me, what are you in, coach? What are you in? And he would yell out, what we were supposed to be in and everything. And even if he thought it was wrong, he never tried to step on my toes. And then the other thing is, the very first game I coached as a freshman coach there, he was mopping the floor before the game, like mopping the gym floor. And, that always, that went really far with showing me what kind of person he was too, that he's not above anybody else in his program. And that's kind of what he preaches. And that's why I feel like they're so successful and he gets, the most out of everybody. With Hamir being there both years that I was there, he was certainly a great player. And then Andre came in my second year and was a freshman. And, I remember Frush at the time. One of the first times I saw Andre play as a freshman, Frush goes, he's gonna be a lottery pick. And, I'm pretty skeptical of, when people make those statements about kids who are 14, 15 years old. But, obviously look at what Andre turned out to be. But what made Andre great was the player you see him now, he's always been that kind of player. He's always the player who he does whatever the team needs. He's not like, oh, I'm the man here. He's very he leads by example, and that's what makes him so great. But those 2 years, I mean, were phenomenal. We won the Federation both years, got to go out to Las Vegas, California, Virginia, Maryland. So I got to see a lot of the country too, and just see how that on that level, how they do things and how they run things and how good you have to be at that level. Because we played out in California at the Max Preps Invitational, around some of the best teams in the country. We played in Las Vegas when we were a game away from, if we won our second game there, we won our first round. If we won the second round, we would have played Chino Hills when the Ball brothers were there. So that's the level of basketball. So it was great to see that level of basketball and be around that level of basketball. And also to be able to have that success, but also to have a guy like Frush, to kind of allow me to do my own thing and find my own way, as a coach.
So there's one other person I do want to bring up from the academy days that we shared. Another unfortunate passing that happened a few years ago. I gotta bring up Pat Fillion because I can't have a conversation that involves the time I spent in the academy, whether it was as an announcer or helping you out with the freshman team, without bringing him up because he was. And then also obviously I crossed paths with him again when he took over Bryan and Stratton and running their athletic department because he played some of his games at Sage's gym and asked me to announce those as well. But yeah, it's just crazy because anytime I think of him, I automatically think, well, damn, he would have been crazy about Marcus coming home from Cornell and playing at Albany. And then Lauren and seeing what she's been doing and just, anyways, just a little bit about Pat because he was a tremendous coach and just as tremendous as a human being as well, in my opinion.
So with the my history with St. Rose, with my dad starting the program there and stuff, I've known Pat for a long time, not well, but knew him well enough. My first year at Academy, he was still the women's assistant out in, I don't remember if he was at Air Force. I know he was at Air Force at one time, but or some cool school in Kansas. But he came. So when we went out to California, we had a practice gym in the hotel, in the lobby of the hotel, and I knew Pat was coming into town to watch Marcus play. The coaches knew, none of the players did. And, we set it up at a certain point where Frush was facing the door and Marcus was facing Frush. So his back was to the door and, Pat walked in and walk behind Marcus and put his arm around him, and to see Marcus's face, and but that was really the first time I really got to see Pat in that light and everything. And then he moved back because he wanted to be closer to his kids while they were in high school. And I remember Jim Maxdorf, our JV coach, was taking the year off for some health problems. But he was only taking a year off. So when Frush talked to me, he called me and he said, "Hey, Mike, I'm not moving you up to JV because," and at that point we didn't know I'd only be there one more year. He said, I don't want to move you up because I'm going to have to move you back. He goes, because Max is coming back. I don't want to do that. Pat Fillion just moved back. He's in the middle of coaching jobs right now. So I'm going to bring him in for a year. And I said, okay. So, and Pat was fantastic. I mean, to work with, it was like Fruch and I worked at the school, but none of the other coaches worked at the school. So, I was Pat's kind of go-to guy at the school when he needed anything done, because he was at St. Rose. The way Academy ran practices back then, because they didn't have their field house yet, is JV and freshmen would practice at the same time, going on the side courts. So Pat and I would frequently be around each other and talk and joke around and shoot the breeze and everything. And then because the varsity team was a national team and we had our own travel schedule, the freshman and JV played back to back a lot. So on the road. So Pat and I would obviously spend a lot of time together with that too. And it allowed me also to it gave me another mentor, because of, when we were traveling around together, I'd pick his brain and stuff. In fact, the press break I run is the press break he taught me. Yeah. And then I was out in Colorado, when he passed. And I remember that day I was wearing, I decided to wear Justin Simon shirt. Justice was a kid who played for my father, rather. And he passed away from cancer while he was playing for my father. And they made shirts that said Simon on the back and had, that stuff. So I wore that, and I went in and we were in the circle, and I told my guys, I'm like, you don't know when it's going to be over. And I told them, I go, one of the biggest personalities in upstate New York, Capital Region basketball, passed away. And the kids, obviously the kids didn't know who he was. So, but their reaction, I feel was pretty, they could tell how much Pat meant to me and how much that bothered me. So that was a huge loss that we didn't, I don't think the basketball community got over for a while.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the one memory that I connect. There's another, and it kind of involves Pat, but doesn't involve Pat, that I connect to. The time I was there with you at Academy was I don't know why, but he missed one practice one day, and somehow it got stuck that I was essentially running the JV practice. And you remember the JV team back then?
Yeah.
And how
Rob Brown, Marlon Campbell.
Yeah, let's just say I was. I don't talk down about. I'm not going to name names. There was a couple of players I was not very fond of on that JV team, and you may or may not have just mentioned one of them. Hint: it wasn't Marlon Campbell. But hey, listen. What amazed me though is, because I still vividly remember that one practice. Rob grew up, man, and it's just it's wild what when you see the development, even just
Yeah.
year to year, it's just wild to see how people can develop, just as much as they develop as an athlete. It's just wild to me how that works
Just
out.
real quick about Rob. I would go into, so on the weekends we'd practice separately. So I would go into during Pat, because like I said, I worked at the school academy, did this thing where they changed their locks and stopped giving keys to non-teacher coaches. So I would have to go, even though Pat would practice at 8 and the varsity I'd have to be there for varsity at 10, but then JV or the freshman rather wouldn't practice until noon. So I'd have to go in at 8 though and let Pat in. And so I would just sit there because I'm like, what am I going to do for 2 hours? I'm going to go back home and I don't know, have to turn right back around. But how I always fold my practice plan and have it in the front of my shorts so I can glance down at it really quick. And Rob used to take a piece of paper because Frush used to always have like stats on the table and whatnot. So he would take a piece of paper, fold it, put it in his pants, and walk around and be like, "I'm Coach Long. I'm Coach Long." I thought that was funny. That Rob was like you said, Rob was
He was a character and a half.
Yeah, he was a character.
Now, and then we get to most recently. Obviously, I mentioned how you were at Hoosick Falls for the JV boys last year, but for a couple years before that, you were at LaSalle Institute as helping out with that JV boys program, and you got to work under a guy who just took Colony High boys for a ride this past season, in Greg Davis, and there were a lot of questions for Greg going into this past season. And that was in spite of the talent he had on the squad that was with him. But as someone who knew Greg and knew his capabilities just by watching what he was doing at LaSalle, what were your thoughts about seeing what Greg was able to accomplish with Colony this year? And what do you think about Greg on your own as well?
I think Greg's a great coach. I think Greg he knows the game really well. He knows what it takes to win. He teaches simple stuff, but it's stuff that's going to make guys better. I always say this: he has an uncanny ability. Now, normally when there's a timeout, you might get the board, you might draw something up. But normally when the other coach calls a timeout, at least for me, I'm like, I have nothing to talk about. Like so I'm basically using that timeout just to, give a pep talk to my kids or whatever. But every timeout, if the opposing coach called it, whatever, he would be like the board, he would have something ready to draw up. And I've just never seen anybody with that ability before to have a timeout fully planned out in his head as soon as the other guy calls it. I think I loved working for Greg as his JV coach because he let me do whatever I wanted to do. And he stayed out of things and, gave me that professional courtesy and professional trust that I wasn't going to screw things up too much. Because as a varsity coach, it's your program, your neck is on the line. And if the results aren't there, when he got the job at Colony, so he got the teaching job at Colony, and then, it came out on Twitter, there were some rumors that he was next in line for the Colony boys job, and then within a couple weeks that happened. But I think it was a slam dunk hire for Colony. They got a guy. Greg's our age. Greg's 36. Had to think about how old I was for a minute, but Greg 36 also. So they got a great coach for the next 20, 25 years. I wasn't really surprised at all. I guess I was a little surprised at how quickly he was able to turn that program into, what it's become. Um, I didn't think he would be able to do what he did in 1 year. I knew they were going to be a lot better than they've been, and they were going to be really good. But I wasn't surprised that he was able to turn it around.
Now, I wanted to save two specific topics for the end, because I really wanted to get your thoughts about it, uh, the most out of the things we've been talking about. First thing I wanted to bring up: the reaction of you and your father when you found out about St. Rose closing. That was announced originally. I want to say it was around Thanksgiving time. Might have been a week or two after. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it was last fall when the original announcement came out. And then obviously, um, you have all the different stuff happening where now you got teachers trying to figure things out, students trying to figure things out, student athletes who weren't involved in winter sports transferring out like mid semester and all this, just a bunch of craziness. And then athletic director Lori Teal getting hired at Siena, but still helping out at St. Rose in the meantime to finish out their academic year to provide some consistency across the board with their athletic department. But all in all, how did you, what was the original reaction of you and your father when you found out, that a school that you both had so much connection to ended up shutting its doors back in May?
Um, so I mean, for my father, it was definitely um, very unpleasant news. When something that's his legacy. I mean, the program at St. Rose is his legacy, and that's why he's in he's in the St. Rose Hall of Fame, but that's why he's in the New York State Capital District Hall of Fame. For his time at St. Rose for what he did there. Um, a lot of he had a lot of spent a lot of time with foreign players. I went out a few times with some foreign players of his from that era. Um, you know, we went up to the last home game they had there, and my dad throughout the ceremonial first tip. So a lot of us younger alumni, that's the first time we really got together. Um, so that was fun to see everybody. But I think it's unfortunate. I know especially the basketball alumni from St. Rose it was a really strong group. Um, and I think for them it's tough and it's sad. They feel like, just like my father, I think feels a little bit like their legacy is kind of not what it once was, because it's a school that doesn't exist anymore. For me, I mean, yeah, I was there for a couple years. I spent my childhood years going to camps there and stuff. And then I was there for a couple years in the basketball program. Like I said, I was manager for 2 years. I got to go out to Syracuse for 2 exhibition games out there. So I got a lot of experience there in my own right. Worked basketball camps there when I was a student, and then afterwards. So it definitely affects me not as much. I think because I didn't graduate from there. Like I feel much more connected to Sage, where I got my master's degree, than I do to St. Rose. But my dad specifically, I know it bothered him a lot, and it still does. And he still, he'll still talk about it.
And then obviously, uh, it wouldn't be proper to have this show to uh, to go an hour and not discuss your father. Obviously, like you mentioned before, a mentor to you, on the basketball side, along with being your father, and um, somebody that I have the utmost admiration for from the time I met him when he came in to be an assistant under Coach Domel, and you telling me all the stuff that he had done, and being able to look him up and even interview him a few times in the past, and even now as he's coaching the men's program at Hudson Valley with Coach Pierce by his side. Can't forget about him. But
Just won assistant coach of the year too.
I
So
saw that. I saw that.
finally, long time coming, long overdue.
Ed's a special man. But to focus on your father, I mean, it's just a legacy of, geez. I mean, if you include his time playing at Siena, I mean, we're talking over 50 years in the game of basketball as a player, as a coach. Like we mentioned, establishing the St. Rose program, really bringing that Sage program to a height never seen before when it was still a junior college before they shut down the program. I believe it was like 03 in that ballpark.
03, yeah. 02, 03 was their last year.
Yeah. And then obviously his time at CBA, and then um, at St. Rose a little bit with Brian Bury, and then now at Hudson Valley. I mean, like for somebody who may not know that much about your father, or may not have had the pleasure of getting to meet him, how do you explain your father to somebody? Like, because to me, it's hard to sum him up in just like one or two sentences. It's very difficult for me to do.
I don't know. I mean, he's my dad, and that's kind of how I know him and how I would describe him. I guess like I know that a lot of people have very high opinions of him, and always make sure to let me know what their opinions are of him. And I just, like I said, I always grew up, he was always my father, so it was always, like I was listening to your show a few weeks ago when you had John Kamak on, and Kamak was talking about his father, how coaching at Potsdam, and how it's a very unique experience to be the son of a college coach. And K-Mac and I worked the gym rat that weekend. So we talked about that interview and we bonded over our shared experiences. I mean, it's just something you can't really describe to people. I think, one of the things that I think makes my dad special that I've learned from talking to people and hearing what people have to say is, I've never, and I'm not just saying this because he's my father. I haven't been around a coach that has his ability to connect with people. And his ability to, I mean, he's 77 years old and he's still, connecting to these 18, 19, 20-year-old people, and to have that ability, I mean, that's something really special. That's honestly what has driven me in my life to do the things that I've done, and get involved with the things that I've gotten involved with. He's just somebody, and I'm trying to be objective. He's just somebody that the connection he has with people really from the get-go. I mean, you said it from the first day you walked in and at CBA. I mean, it was like everybody there were his, best friends and everything. And he's genuine about that too, because we've both met people who are kind of fake about that. And he's 100% genuine in everything he does. And that's, I guess if I had to describe him, that's how I would describe him. Just somebody who's really genuine in everything that he does.
Yeah. The other thing I want to bring up in connection to your father, and I didn't even mention this to you as we were discussing this show over the on and off for the last week, but I gotta bring this person up. I have to bring up your mother, because if there's anybody that, how should I put this? I feel like your parents are the most complimentary couple I know. Like, she's the spitting image of a coach's wife in every aspect, as far as the way that, she's always supporting what your father's done, and everything you've done now the mother of a coach now. But she just, for as much as I have high regard for your father as a coach and as a human being, I have just as much regard for your mother as a mother and as a human being, because she's remarkable. And like, what about herself, and then her and your father as a couple for as long as they've been together? What, like, how does that drive you as a human being and as a coach as well?
So my mom was really super involved when my dad coached at Siena, and then when he coached at St. Rose. I mean, she's friends with all. Back then, you could also, the drinking age was 18, so there were a lot more, or there was a lot more fraternization between coaches and players. And so she got to know the players really well. She got to know the wives really well, and she's still friends. When he got to Sage, I had come around by then. So my mom wasn't really that involved with my dad's basketball stuff, rather than just be there to support him for the first probably 10 years of my life. And then I got old enough where I could go on the road with my dad and go on road trips and everything. And then when I was at CBA, I mean, my mom was at every game. She came to some games when I was in college. But they've been out to Hoosick Falls. Obviously didn't come out to Colorado, but were able to watch games on the NFHS network. Came to a lot of games when I was at LaSalle. Came to a lot of games when I was at Albany Academy. And she always jokes that she's always known as either Mike Long's wife or Mike Long's mother. Because she is, like you said, she's supportive. She's always around. She's always there. And, I think that she, obviously loves her family really much, a lot. And I think that, she thinks that it's important for people to see that, and you don't, she real quickly, I know we're kind of running out of time, but she told me, cause I know a lot of like Brian Fruscio always said, if you ever look at the really, top level coaches, they're all divorced or they're single, and so my mom told me, I mean, she when I was a little kid and my dad was going to practice and going on road trips and going all the time, it went through her head that she was like, is this going to work? And then she thought about the alternative. And I think that this could be a model for a lot of, spouses of coaches. It went through her head. She's like, okay, well, I can either be, sit here and let my husband do what he loves, or I can be unhappy because I'm not with him anymore. And I think that's how she looks at it. I think she looks at it as just kind of something she's got to do to be the good spouse and the good mom,
First off, when it comes to us talking, don't ever say we're coming up against it, because we could talk for hours on end.
I'm sure your listeners would love to hear us talk for about 6-7 hours.
We could sit here and debate Yankees Mets if you want to, but we won't we won't bore them with that. Yeah, man. I mean, she's remarkable. All right. To wrap up though, something that I've been doing in recent shows, you probably heard it or seen it, since, like you mentioned, the K-Mac interview. Life's most important questions. Are you ready for this, sir?
Yeah, I'm ready.
First answer that comes to your head, don't give it too much thought. There's no right or wrong answer. Well, there is one question I think there's a clearly wrong answer, but you'll see what I mean when we get to it. All right, man.
Okay. All right.
All right. Now, I don't remember if you're much of a soda drinker or not, but I'm going to ask this anyways. Are you Pepsi or Coke?
Coke.
Okay. All right. All right. I mean, yeah, okay. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No. Me and my principal were actually just talking about this yesterday. No. He looked it up.
Timely conversation. I love it. Chocolate or vanilla?
Oh, vanilla.
Okay. This is the one where I think there's clearly a wrong answer. What goes in the bowl first? The cereal or the milk?
The first? Definitely
Yes.
the cereal.
Thank you. Thank you. Because I've been having this ongoing debate for a decade with somebody, and she still insists that the milk goes in first. I don't know why. I
Is it somebody you live with?
no. It's actually a girl that played at Sage while I announced out there, and we're still friends to this day.
I thought it was a nice way for you to say your wife, but
No. My wife's not crazy like that. All right. Final question. If you're on a deserted island, who are the two people you would trust the most to have with you that would help you get off the island?
So my friend Steve King was my assistant coach at LaSalle for 2 years. He's been my right hand man for a long time. The reason he didn't come out to Hoosick Falls is he's a realtor, so he drives around a lot. That's another, trip out, and he's not going out that way. He's going usually west, so that's a whole. But he's somebody that he made me such a better coach and such a better person. The 2 years we were together, even though we had been friends for longer than that, we had never coached together. And just watching how he interacted with everybody, he's a guy I would trust with anything really. And then second person, I mean, I think, it kind of sounds cliche. We've been talking about him a lot, but I think my father, because he would do anything he could for me, certainly. And, it's good to have those people in your corner.
I had a feeling those would be your two answers. I didn't want to tell you ahead of time, but I had a feeling those would be your two answers. Very good answers, by the way. I totally agree with those. Man, I gotta tell you, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. It's not we get to have these long form conversations anymore between the stuff I'm doing, stuff you're doing, and whatever.
We're all around.
Yeah, but damn, I thoroughly enjoyed doing this with you, man, and
it was great.
I'm trying not to get emotional, so give me a sec here. I've loved seeing your growth, both as a human being and as a coach, and to know that you're getting an opportunity. I think I literally think this couldn't have come to a more perfect time for you, man. I really think you're getting it just like it's right there. It's the perfect spot for you at this point, man.
It definitely feels like the right place at the right time. I feel like, I was forcing a lot of things early on in my career. I wasn't kind of letting it just come. I knew where the end goal was, what I wanted, but I wasn't, just patient, and I didn't wait for the right situation at the right time. I think Academy was probably the last time I can honestly say that I felt this way. But right now I feel like, it's definitely the right situation for me, and it's the right time for me.
Well, man, I definitely appreciated having you on. I really, I know we'll stay in touch, especially once we get in season, because I know you'll probably bug the hell out of me to get up to a game. But who knows? Maybe I'll already see you at a game, because I know Hoosick Falls. I always said a boys game because I know Hoosick Falls loves doing stuff with Eric Medved. So who
And
knows? Maybe
my goal is to have you announce us at sectionals and at states this year. So
hell yeah, hell yeah. I would. Oh, I would love that, man. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think if I've ever announced a game where you were coaching.
and
I've
as
only.
an assistant a bunch,
Yeah,
but not as I don't think ever as a no. You announced when I played Rob Coleman when I was at Ulster.
that's right. Yes,
Because
that's right.
we went out to the fountain afterwards.
That's right. Yeah. Well, now we're gonna take care of section two. I'll take care of the publicity side of section two, and you take care of things over in the Western League, and we'll meet in the middle somewhere. How about that?
Right. Sounds good.
All right, man. Definitely say hi to your parents for me, and don't give Mike too many problems. Just stay under the radar a little bit. All right, man.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon, Mike.
All right. See ya.
All right, that was Mike Long Jr. The new girls varsity head coach for Hoosick Falls. I'm keeping it together, so we're good. Yeah, the way I put it is, I learned a long time ago that like you only have so many friends in life that you keep close for a while, and you pretty much put them on one hand, and Mike's definitely one of those for me, and we've kept close through the years, and it's just great to see what he's been able to do. So yeah, it was great having him on the show. Again, we'll have Brian Capitula back next show. A little under the weather, like I mentioned in the beginning, from all the travel he's been doing to wrap up AAU. But yeah, we'll get him back on next episode. Don't forget, we're on Twitter at 84 Feet Podcast. We're on Facebook. Just search for 84 Feet with Cady and Cap. And you can always email the show, 84feetpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again to Mike Long Jr. And until then, hope you enjoyed episode 18. We'll catch you next time here on 84 Feet with Cady and Cap. Adios.